We are doing a better job in creating a positive school culture on each of our school campuses. Just a couple of housekeeping items. For those of you who have not been to these facilities, the restrooms are located to my left, behind the screen to my left, both the men's and the women's restroom. There are waters and cookies located at each end of the room in the back. So please help yourself. Again, we need everyone to sign in so that we can pick up the sign-in sheets. And once you sign in, go ahead and be seated. And I want to review today's agenda with us corporately so that we know what to expect during our time together. Does everyone have an agenda? I take that as yes?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. On your agenda, what you will find is after we open up with our welcome, there will be about a 30-minute presentation just about the social emotional development of our high school students. And that will be brought to us by our trauma-informed care trainer, Dr. Gina Rodriguez. Afterward, we'll take a small break, and then we're going to come back and be more interactive with you in talking about Tier 1 interventions that we can all do in support of ensuring our young people get what they need when they don't respond in a manner in which we approve. For Tier 1 interventions, what you've noticed, we've broken it down into 3 principles. I'm going to start with the first principle, even though they're out of order. I'll tell you why they're out of order for today. The first principle is we are community members responsible for each other. The second principle is when harmony in the classroom shifts, actions to take to get back on track. And principle 3, we've tried the strategies for principles 1 and 2, and there is still a greater need to be addressed. So today we're going to work and provide each other with concrete actions that we can put in place actually tomorrow to address misbehavior. Does that make sense? Talk to me, guys.
Yes.
All right. So with that, I would like to just acknowledge some of our community partners in the room. This will be the first year when it comes to our secondary school sites that we will have resident doctors assigned to each of our school sites. There are 6 resident doctors from Kaiser Permanente, and their focus is around community health. And they will be partnering with your school site teams in helping us build that positive school culture. Today, we are graced with 2 of them. If both of our residents, I don't see where you went. Oh, if you could just stand. Can we give them a warm applause? We have Dr. Powell and Dr. Bernberg. Dr. Bernberg specifically will be assigned to Jesse Bethel this year, and Dr. Powell will be assigned to Solano Middle. Thank you, ladies, and we appreciate you being here. They haven't started yet. You will get the notice of when they will begin serving our sites. And also, we appreciate the presence of our own probation officers who are here and who work in tandem with us in support of our children. If they could please stand so that we can welcome you again. And thank you for being here. All right. With that, Dr. Rodriguez. Has she made it yet? All right, so what we're going to do is adjust the agenda because I don't see her coming So she must be stuck somewhere. So we're going to adjust the agenda. Is that all right with everyone? And we're going to have Dr. Sprague. This will be somewhat out of order. We're going to skip the social emotional development of our high school students and go directly to Principle 3. Now the actions that Dr. Sprague will be sharing with us are actions we are to put in place after Principle 1 and Principle 2 have not been successful for us. Does that make sense? So we're going to jump into Principle 3 and let him present to us the research as well as the day-to-day practices that we could implement in our classrooms. And then we're going to engage you for best practices that some of us are already doing, but we can share them corporately to help the body. With that, let us give a warm welcome to Dr. Jeffrey Sprague.
How y'all doing? Good, nice to see you, and thanks for coming out in this warm place. Oh, no, I think I'll be okay. You want to look for a handout that basically has Principle 3 on the top. It says we've tried Principle 1 and 2, or as we might often say, I've tried everything and nothing works, type of thing. And I'll be working through that with you, and we'll think good thoughts about Gina, and hopefully she's okay. That's not the reason to go forward. I'm glad to see those of you that I have met, and there's a lot of you that I haven't met, so I'm hoping to have that opportunity sometime this year to come visit your classrooms and hang out a little bit. I like high school groups. We often make the joke, but I'm a recovering high school teacher myself. I taught special ed high school back in the 80s when I still had hair and things like that. So that's good. I'm going to do one more thing here, which is get my watch up. There we go. Okay, and so I'm going to go at this for a while, and then we'll give you a chance to chat with each other in that regard. So again, put the 3 principles up: community membership and taking care of kids, but also taking care of ourselves. Will get addressed there, and then I'm going to do just a bit related to when we have to use more what we might refer to as traditional discipline in that regard. And I was also asked to present just a little bit of information about what we know about this work called school-wide PBIS in your district. Some people know it as based on a book that I wrote called Best Behavior. And I'm going to talk to you about something I'm going to frame as timeout, and you'll see what that is about in a bit, and you'll get at least ample time to chat with each other, or at least an opening conversation basically about it. So what we brought really to more than 30,000 schools now in the United States is called School-Wide Positive Behavior Support. And I call them the Big Six, if you will. We'll see if the laser doesn't quite show up. Set the rules such as be safe, be respectful, be responsible. Teach those rules or communicate those to the students in your classes. And we know that high school is dramatically different than elementary or even middle in terms of how you communicate and how you involve students in setting those values and standards. And Rita will give us some additional insights in that regard. It's also useful to recognize and reward students for following the rules. You would hope, for example, that their grades would be a major reward, but we know for some students they didn't get that memo type of thing. But basically what the research that we've been doing, kids tell us something pretty interesting. One is they'll find your instruction rewarding if you put some emotion in it, okay? Not like too much excitement, but they want to have some sense that you're like into it. Does that make sense? Which I think is pretty cool and hopefully easy to do. I think you all are invested in the subjects that you're expert in teaching. But kids also tell us that they want to have some sense that you like them and they're on their side. And that doesn't mean that you have to take them bowling or over for Thanksgiving. It's things like calling them by name, occasionally greeting them at the door when they come in, ask them how they're doing, and again, Rita will give us many more specific strategies in that regard. But just a key piece there is to remember that reward doesn't necessarily have to mean that you give students a good behavior token or you have a raffle or something like that. That can be fun, but sometimes it doesn't play out so well in high school. So relationship and emotional involvement seems to be what the youth are telling us. We've been doing a bunch of focus groups this year and last year in high schools to help integrate this work. Supervising and monitoring students is also very helpful. Bullying, for example, is in your school. We know that even if they are teenagers, they need to know that adults are watching and paying attention. And kids can also help supervise each other if they have that expectation put out. What I'll focus on a bit more today is what we call firm but fair corrections for misbehavior, and a little bit about data, but not so much on the data piece today. So you may be wondering, why do we have to do this piece? And I think there's some pretty good reasons. Basically, if we implement those big six, you'll see a few things again on, and I've got this also replicated in the handout. And I think I mentioned, but let me make sure, if you don't have that handout, there should be some at each table, or if not, please raise your hand and we'll get one to you right away in that regard. So quick list: reduction of problem behavior, improved academic performance. Interestingly, and some of you may not agree, but some of you will, if we keep behavior under control, that's actually one of the preconditions for learning, right? In the research that we do on PBIS, often the academic outcomes are stronger than the behavioral outcomes. Have any of you not encountered misbehavior in your classroom this year? Okay? But this guy's a liar, okay? But the point is, and again, as Gina will tell us, it's developmentally normal for teenagers to piss us off a little bit. Does that make sense? They're going to do stuff that lights our fire, and we at least have the opportunity to maybe respond in a different way. So we'll learn about that. We've also done studies of staff member well-being, and I think you'll also agree that if your school feels more organized and it feels like the adults are aligned around what the procedures and protocol are, you're going to actually feel less stress in that regard, and you'll want to hang around longer. You'll have a longer kind of career. So we see all that stuff. And then for some students, which we'll begin to focus on as the year goes on too, they're pretty challenging, right? And we know in high school, you got kids that are at high risk for dropping out, right? And they've had many years of practice not playing the game of school so well, and yet they're still in our classroom. So we wonder, what do we do with those youth? So we'll begin that conversation today, but it'll continue as we go along the year with this staff development initiative. So as regards individual student supports, big idea, and maybe you said this at least once this year, I've tried everything and nothing works with that kid. Has anybody said that? Okay. And you know, God bless us all. I wish it would be easier. But a few things we know even from the research. I could come up here and tell you that I know what works. But what I do know is that it takes a lot longer than we'd like to get results. For high school kids, we actually call it a trajectory. Like if you shoot an arrow or a rocket, their trajectory may be actually multiple years past their public schooling experience. We may just be a step along the way for kids that are most at risk, but what we do know is that they have any form of a quality secondary experience, that trajectory that they're on will be much, much better. And that's harder for us to predict on a day-to-day basis when we're trying to teach them history or social studies or math or biology or something like that. It's also with more at-risk kids to recognize that regression is normal, okay? They may be good one day and they may be pretty challenging the next day. And that's pretty normal, right? What we like, and I always wanted this as a teacher, had a good day with a kid, tomorrow's going to be better, right? But usually when we're tracking kids that are challenging, it's just not true, right? And so one of the things that we'll also be focusing on this year is learning to be more mindful about what is progress or not for more challenging kids. It's also important to recognize that we can reduce problem behaviors, but we're very unlikely to eliminate them. Does that make sense? So I might ask this is intended to be humorous, raise your hand if you've mastered impulse control. Okay, right? So let's not expect 16-year-olds to be quite good at holding their temperature, their breath in that way. And we can also recognize that the type of individualization that's needed to be successful with tough kids is often challenging because not everyone's willing to put in the effort, right? Some of us may be saying, again, I teach history, not students, type of thing, and we get a little bit tired of the extra work it takes to work with those kids. And I'm not complaining about you all or myself, but to acknowledge that there is that feeling as well. It's like, do I have to go back at it again? And as long as they are a student, maybe that's good. And the last piece then is, it may feel good in the moment to stand in judgment of students' character, but anger and outrage usually doesn't get us to the places that we'd like to get with the kid or with our reputation with other students, okay? So a little bit, I'm going to set up this as a reflection and a conversation. I don't intend for this to be absolutely the only way to go about it, but we find it useful to remind us of what are evidence-based classroom management practices. And I've gotten to visit your schools at least a little bit, but a few things we know make a difference. A clean and predictable, organized classroom type of thing. And maybe you know that too. If your room's sort of together, you feel a little bit more at peace as well. If you have school-wide expectations, are they posted in your classroom, right? And are they visible to students, and can they tell you what those are and what they look like, right? Are your learning objectives posted, right? What do you expect kids to know and be able to do today? It seems simple, maybe if we say it verbally, but one of the things we know about kids under stress is they don't process verbal information very well. So it's good to have things written down, okay? Raise your hand if you all have a to-do list. Got a to-do list? You have more than one? Okay? Did you ever do something that wasn't on your to-do list, but you went back and wrote it down and checked it off? Okay? Man, that was supposed to be funny now. Okay, anyway. But the point is, right, that sometimes having things written down actually lowers our stress because it's more predictable in that regard. Next piece is begin with a clear attention signal. When you begin class, when you make a transition from activity to activity, make sure that you have a consistent, predictable way to gain students' attention, other than trying to talk over them or get frustrated because they don't come back quite that much. If you give instructions and praise, use school and classroom language. So for example, if respect is a rule in your school, then make sure you prompt students by using that language. And again, Rita and Gina will also give us insights in that regard. Make instruction interesting and engaging, right? And I'm not going to be able to give you a workshop on active engagement strategies, but when we work with students, they tell us, you know, the peppy, sort of passionate presentation will definitely keep them on task more. We also use what we call a positivity ratio. And if you find yourself with students who may be more challenging than others, and we all have those, we may find that the relationship breaks down because we start to focus on the negative with that kid. Have you ever been in it? Sometimes it's called the criticism trap. Does that make sense? So if you find yourself in the criticism trap, we actually borrowed it from marriage and family therapy. Make sure you do some repair. Does that make sense? And Rita will also help us with that, at least as an opening salvo today. And then the final piece we'll do is to deliver corrective consequences in a firm but fair manner. So I've talked at you for a bit. If you go to page 2 of my handout, there's a little table. It's called Classroom Management Basics. And what I'd like you to do is turn to your neighbor or a group of your colleagues and say, of those basics, you know, tell them how you do it, or I learned something new today, but basically give you a few minutes to see how does those set of practices fit together in my school, in my classroom. Questions? Okay, good. I'll give you just a few minutes to do that. may I have your attention, please? Give you a chance to talk there. I want to do one more piece, and we'll take a break right at 3:15 3 o'clock as promised. So we'll get as far through this as we can. So would anyone like to share one of their world-class classroom management practices? We got, I call it the Oprah. We got microphones up here. No volunteers? There he goes. Okay.
I work at Everest Academy. My name is Pedro Garcia, and this is my team. And the way I have my classroom is, our kids, they love to do art. And, I have an art one in my classroom as well. I teach all subjects, by the way. So my kids have a lot of their work on the board. They bring pictures in from home with their parents. So we post all that up. And after every story we read, they always summarize it with a written response and also an art project that they do. And they really enjoy that. So that's part of ownership in the classroom, and they keep the class clean. They own it, so they clean it. And that's my part.
Cool, very nice, thank you. Thank you. And again, part of the intent with the little checklist thing is to get those ideas out there and do that kind of sharing with each other. You know, this is hard work, as you know, and it's good to support each other and share kind of in that regard. So I'm going to make kind of a major shift here and give you a chance to also chat about this as we go to the break. Have you heard anybody say this year in relation to problem behavior that a student's done? There has to be a consequence. Right? What's going to happen to that kid, okay? That type of thing. So let's reflect on that a little bit about whether that works and what's the definition of works. But we're going to use it in the framework of punishment, and often a common procedure when things don't work out. And usually Rita and Gina and I have been doing this in a different order, so we're a little out of order, but we want to make the best use of your time, is to do a lot of stuff to prevent what I'm about to talk about to begin with. So I'm going to call it timeout. Have you ever, don't raise your hand, but maybe you've had to ask a student to leave your classroom in the name of discipline, okay? So let's learn a little bit more about that, what to expect, and how to problem solve kind of around that. We're obviously being given a lot of messages about doing that less, and yet maybe as teachers on the front line we're wondering, well, then what's the alternative? So we're starting to have that conversation as well. So the first thing to remember is that if it is punishment, it may involve providing a consequence, but we should see a reduced probability of the behavior in the future, all right? So punishment actually means two things: a consequence, and it reduces the probability in the future. Consequence doesn't have to mean that you make the student feel bad, that you shame the student, you in front of their students, that they have to lose something. One of the things that Rita will share with us is maybe by the consequence to a student is working it out with them, they may misbehave less in the future, and it's based on strengthening the relationship between you and the student, and not just that they lost something in that regard. So that's a key piece. And then a big frame that we'll also hear from Gina is sometimes the chance to cool off will reduce problem behavior now and in the future. And hopefully you've had that experience as well. If you can give a signal to a student that this isn't going so well, but give them a chance to cool off, then you avoid that cycle of escalation, which we often say is like mud wrestling with a pig. Sometimes the pig loves it, but you both get dirty. Does that make sense? So we want to avoid that power struggle type of thing. And one thing to remember too, which many of you do, often this stuff is really not clean. Does that make sense? So you really will both get dirty, but you'll have a chance to repair that again in the future if you do it. So if you will, technically timeout's a behavior management procedure in which you may have to separate a student from others for a period of time. The first goal is to give the student an opportunity to regain self-control And the second goal is to reduce the future probability of that behavior. But let's also remember, if I give a student a timeout, such as an office referral or sit in the corner, that it's not going to work with one experience. It's going to have to take multiple chances to do that cool off or that removal, if you will. So what we're going to say is any form of exclusionary discipline can be considered a timeout. It can fall then on a continuum of restrictiveness. And the legal sort of perspective here is that each time I remove a student from the classroom to another environment, even if it's the corner of the room, we're restricting their right to receive a free and appropriate public education. Does that make sense? So in essence, it ultimately becomes a civil rights sort of issue there. And if you go to the page 4 of your handout, this next slide I'm going to show, there's actually a little picture of that continuum piece. So if you will, if we have to break the action, we can go all the way from planned ignoring. Obviously the goal is to not use out-of-school suspension or expulsion, but also to recognize that sometimes students will be extremely disruptive and you need to do something, right? And part of my encouragement in the opening conversation today is if we do something, let's do it very systematically and in the right way type of thing so that we avoid having to use it too much or to end up feeling ineffective in the use of that consequence, if you will. So first thing to do is to define the target behaviors, and the advocacy here is those should be defined on your office referral form. Okay?